Welcome to Simply Sera. I am Sera Stockham. I am so pleased that you are joining us for this conversation. This is a repeat guest for us, so if you want the first part, you need to go look for that part. We will put information in the show notes how to get there. But Jeff, Yukikazu, Sera teased us last time about this incredible trip that he had coming up to Japan. And at the end of our conversation, we said, Jeff, please come back. Please come back and share more. And so here is Jeff. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me again.
Absolutely. Oh, it's so good. So good. So as I was sharing with our audience that's listening live, that's listening in, as it best works for them, whether it's on television or podcast, we are in this space of just suspense about this trip that you have taken to Japan and the expansion of who you are as a business person, as somebody who's very carefully selecting who you choose to work with, and then also for the people that you took with you. We would love to hear all about that. And I'm going to get out of the way. I'm actually going to take myself off the screen so that you have the full stage to catch us up to date. Thanks, friend.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, so this was a Reiki focused trip. We called it Reiki Origins, and it was an opportunity for us to bring people from the United States to connect with a Reiki master in Japan and several first students, and able to create an experience and allow for a cultural exchange. So we had several Airbnbs that we rented, the primary one being in Kyoto, where we stayed for 5 days. And the first 2 days were curated for us to do workshops. So the Japanese Reiki master Lisa Sensei did some explanation and a presentation around the history of Reiki in Japan, as well as their understanding of some of the differences. Over the course of the last year, we've been planning this out, and so we were able to learn some of the distinct nuances between how it's being practiced here in the West and how it's being practiced in Japan. And what's interesting is Lisa Sensei herself, she teaches under one of two, I guess, I'm not sure if it would be classified as modalities, but she has a Western way of teaching her students, and she also has the traditional Jikiden way. And so it's interesting because there's certain rules and regulations she has that allows her to claim the title of a Jikiden Reiki master, but she's not allowed to do certain things under that title. So it was cool to learn that aspect, and then also see how the Japanese Western version of Reiki is still also different from itself. So there was a lot that we learned that I don't think would have been possible had we not kind of put this trip together and had the people involved that we did. It was also amazing to have the opportunity to exchange where we were able to show how both sides practice and then actually perform it on another. And so in the Airbnb we had, it was cool because we actually had additional space and rooms. We had more beds than people present. And so one of the rooms we kind of set aside for workshop space where there was actually tatami floors and everything. So we just would lay out several futons, and we were able to use that room where you would have 5 people laying down and then 5 people working on them. We would switch. And so it was really cool to have that experience, and then kind of hear and learn about, what people experienced or felt during that time. We also did attunements. So the Japanese students were able to receive a US attunement, and then vice versa. We were able to receive an attunement from Lisa Sensei. And kind of the precipice of the trip itself was to go and visit Kuramayama, the mountain that Usu Sensei went and meditated on for 21 days when he discovered rediscovered the modern art of Reiki. And so it was cool to kind of walk that path, very similar to the one that he went on. And this trip, as we were curating it, it was so cool how all the pieces fell into place where everyone that's been involved in it is either trained in or was actively training or trained during the time in the art of Reiki. And so we had shirts.
It's so cool because the pictures that I saw online for this, you guys were all wearing the shirts together. I mean, just so amazing that you guys were, yes.
So
what's the kanji say?
The kanjis, these are the kanjis for Reiki. So it says Reiki in it. And we had the calligraphy actually done. This is like brush strokes that were created by an individual friend of the Reiki master in Japan, Lisa Sensei's friend, and also trained at Reiki herself. So she infused the kanjis with her calligraphy with the energy. And she has a business partner who does printing. So she'll do calligraphy. Her business partner will do the printing of the shirts. And so he actually printed the shirt. And in our conversations with them, he had expressed interest in the art itself. And so between when we met them and then the trip being set up itself, he actually trained under Lisa Sensei. And so it was a surprise when we learned about the roster and her students. He was one of the students that was joining us for the so both of our calligrapher and our shirt manufacturer were Reiki trained, and he's doing her mastery course right now to become a Reiki master under, I believe he's doing her version of her Western version of training versus the Jikiden one. And then we also, when we went to Kuramaya, we found a tour guide that she connected us to as well. And then after we kind of learned kind of what he would be able to do and show us and guide us through the path and everything and make recommendations, at the end of the conversation, we're like, by the way, this is the intention of having this is a trip for, all Reiki trained individuals. Are you familiar with Reiki? He's just like, oh yeah, I'm a Reiki master too. So it's just
incredible.
Okay, this is all perfect, right? And so it's been really cool to have all of those touch points. The cool part has been just letting the trip kind of be guided. So those weren't things that we planned initially. Where it was like, yeah, it'd be great to have everyone that is directly involved in this be tied to the energy in some shape or form. And then I think setting that intention, that's exactly what happened. And so that experience was amazing. We got to we had several meals that were also set up like pre-planned, and one of them was after we finished coming down on the mountain, there's a place at the bottom where there's several restaurants along the riverbank. And got to eat right next to the river. It actually rained on us while we were there, but not in a pleasant way. I think it was actually in our favor where it wasn't crowded. There was a lot less people, I think, because of the rain, but it actually felt really nice to experience and have that kind of cool us down. The temperature was really hot and muggy, so the rain actually felt very nice. And I actually did the entire hike barefoot just because I was like, I wanted to feel the ground beneath me, not knowing, what the terrain would be like. And for a majority of the there was a portion of it that was like not marble, but like stone ground. So it was very smooth and it felt good. But then there was a point when we started to hike and trek through more of like the dirt and the rocks and these other parts that was a little more difficult. But there's several power spots at Kuramayama. And so there was one we reached kind of in the mud and the dirt and all the things. And we stopped and there was this kind of this round circular area. And I'm sure you've seen it before, but it's like this round emblem. And then there's the symbol of, it's like 3 dots with a swirl after it. So it looks kind of like this spiral. And it's a very common emblem for like a lot of the temples. And they also have like leeches. And the guide stopped us and was like, hey, by the way, we're stepping into an area that has, a good amount of leeches. So be aware, pay attention if you pick one up. And he's actually like, well, if you're wearing shoes and socks, that could actually be more difficult because you won't see it. He's like, right. If you're barefoot at this time, you'll actually see them. And so you'll know that it's there because otherwise it could be numb and you wouldn't even be aware that on there drinking your blood. And so we just paused in this area and there was a whole kind of stone section where we all stood in a circle, and we just kind of connected to the energy and felt the power running through us. And then after that, we kind of just we separated out, and there was a couple areas where water was flowing and running through, and I was kind of just playing around in the water or something. And someone's like points at my feet, and they're like, "You got a leech." So I looked down, and like there's a little guy just wiggling on my foot. It wasn't like in the movies where these giant thick slug things. It was like a worm, this little thin worm that was just like kind of flailing around. Oh wow. That was the first time I've ever, I think, seen or had a leech in person. And we looked later. It was actually kind of cool where there's a lot of symbolism with the leeches. They're actually a symbol of good. And so it was kind of cool to have that experience with one up. And it didn't hurt or anything, and so I was able to just kind of like grab him by the tail, and he let go and just put him on the side.
Yes.
And so that was really neat. And then there were just many times throughout the trip where, we were able to, like, things didn't go according to plan, but it wasn't something that threw us off or we were like freaking out about it. It was like, cool, we're being guided in a different direction. And having everybody kind of in that flow state of like not attached to a certain outcome and letting it go to be like, cool, this will be better in some shape or form, was really neat. And it's much different from other, vacations or trips or events that I've been a part of. So that was really awesome to just allow things to unfold in a way that was very magical.
I'm just taking all of this in, Jeff, and I so appreciate that you chose to go barefoot, because I presume that Usui Sensei, who was the person that you were sharing that the current Reiki goes back to, that he was barefoot, because as he came running down the mountain, he'd had this experience, right, with the waterfalls, and with it being in the waterfall and having the water on the top of his head, and just coming into this place of experiencing enlightenment is my best word for it, and decided he wanted to run down the hill, go tell others about it in that space. That there are lots of, from what I understand, gnarly roots that kind of come up because it rains so much in that particular area, and that he hit his foot against that. And that was the first time that he understood that what had happened was actually about healing, because as he was holding his foot, his toe that was hurting, he could actually feel the energy from his hand being placed into his foot in that experience. I'm not sure if that's part of the history that you had learned or not, but in that space of being able to actually walk and be there and be barefoot, and what a beautiful choice that you made in that space.
Yeah, I know that there's that's one of the things I've learned, was that he stubbed his toe, and then when he went to kind of hold it, like how that hurt was when he felt the healing. The waterfall aspect actually was not something I've heard in the past, but that's interesting because we've been planning and trying to a waterfall experience for the last year. And when I went to visit last year to kind of explore things, my intention was to find a waterfall, and I wasn't able to last year. So when we were planning it this year, we were looking into where we could do this and have that incorporated in the experience, but we kept hitting barriers where they didn't open the waterfall locations until June. And so we couldn't pre-plan, so we had to wait till June and then call and be like, hey, is this something we can bring a group in? This is how many people we have. But for whatever reason, in the Kyoto area, they ended up closing a lot of the waterfalls. They said that this season was too dangerous, or there was just delays. And again, there was the combination of like allowing things to flow and trusting, but also my frustration of like, this is the second year in a row that we're able to do it. And so what ended up happening was, one of the students on the Japan side, we had shared, we were looking for a way to incorporate the waterfall experience on the Tokyo side. So after we finished in Kyoto, we returned to Tokyo, where the people that joined us from the US stayed, and we kind of had time to integrate and spend some time to explore and kind of turn it into a vacation. While the rest of the Japan side they returned home and back to their lives. But the students heard about this and was like, oh, I actually know a place. I've been to this place, and he went last year. And it was, about 2 hours away from where we were staying, and it would have been kind of hard to navigate to, but a car that could, you know, 7 people. And so he was like, I can drive us. And so he ended up driving us and bringing us to that waterfall, and we had an amazing experience. Unfortunately, it wasn't with the entire group because it was kind of after
Right.
we closed the container for the Reiki Kyoto portion. But
Yes.
it was something we wanted to do and experience to see if we could incorporate it for next year. And that that was an amazing experience as well. And it had stopped raining in Tokyo. The whole time we were in Kyoto, it was pretty much on and off showers. But when we got to Tokyo, there wasn't any rain. When we did the hike to the waterfall, it started to rain, and then once we kind of got to the top, there was just like thunder roaring, and it was just we all were just popped. Like, it's almost like the mountains, like you're here. um,
Yes.
so it was a really cool experience, and it was amazing to feel how strong the waterfall actually is. Because when you're looking at it, it's not like what's the one I'm thinking of here? The giant waterfall that's here. It's like sheets and like a wall of water pouring. It's this. It's almost like the end of a. So you have this light little, like a little bit of water coming down, and you're looking at it like, oh, that's not a crazy waterfall. But when you actually step into it, and you're standing there. The force and the weight of the water is
Yes.
just. It's slapping you. It's like a pillow fight where you're just getting smacked. It doesn't hurt, but you feel the force
Right.
and the
Hear it.
intention. You hear it, you feel it, it overwhelms your senses and you're engulfed in it. But
Yes.
you can feel the cleansing where it's almost just pushing and forcing the energy that doesn't serve you
Yes.
out and through you.
Mhm.
And so it's definitely something we'll be doing at the beginning of our trip next year. So it was
So
great to have that incorporated.
some things about that you shared that I think are so important is other people may be considering having a training someplace else is that you went to it first, you went there last year to go check it out, and that when you booked things that you were very specific in how you wanted things to book, but you were also open to how they may change a little bit. I love that when you booked your Airbnb that you had extra space so that you could have a meeting room, a place that you could set up and just leave and not have to keep setting up and tearing down. I also love that you were actually in a large Airbnb rather than being in, say, a hotel convention space, right? And so that you were able to clean the area, so to speak, and that you were able to start the container, start the ceremony, and to keep it going until you finish the ceremony. And I love that these incredible serendipitous things happened along the way, including having a calligrapher who was already Reiki trained, and then the person be manufacturing them to also come along and to be trained during that time. What a powerful, amazing experience. We're going to get a quick break, but when we come back, Jeff, I would love for you to share the Jeff before this trip and how you looked at business and working with people, and then the transformation of how you see things in this particular space. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm Sera Stockham. Recently, we were doing some renovation work, and as we were doing all of the decorating, the color blue, specifically cobalt, kept showing up for me in different areas in different ways. And I thought, what I really want is a signature piece that is in cobalt. So I went to Glass Arts Collective and found this amazing piece. I absolutely love it. In fact, when it arrived, my husband wanted it. It is so beautiful. It's nice and heavy. It was perfectly packaged. So when it came, there was no concern at all about if it was going to show up all right or not. I love that it's handmade. I love that it's unique. And I invite you to go to the glassartscollective.com and go shopping. Pick something up for yourself. Pick up some gifts for others. I know that you will enjoy how beautiful the work is. I am so excited that Jeff is here sharing this tremendous story about taking a group from America, going to Japan, having a group in Japan that was learning also about how we do things, so a cultural exchange. But in addition to that, doing these spiritual practices, one that we call Reiki or Reiki healing. And in this space, I'm just so excited to hear what Jeff has to say about how he looks at potentially some changes from the business person that he was, already heart-led in terms of how you chose to work with people, already incredibly intuitive in terms of how you chose to reach out to people and choose the people that you were wanting to work with, and then to come into this space of this beautiful, incredible trip with for what some people in the shamanic world, yes, leeches have such a good reputation, right? And so to have that experience as well, what do you see the changes? And perhaps some of them are much more nuanced.
So one of the cool things that I decided, so my Reiki master was the U.S. master for this trip, and so one of the things we decided was to conclude my mastery training while we were in Japan and do the final attunement on Kuramayama. And so that was something that we planned for and anticipated. And so when I left here, I was still training, and I left as a Reiki practitioner. And when we came home, I'm now a Reiki master teacher. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And so there was shift that took place a little bit for the integration because we did the exchange. So the U.S. side got an attunement from Lisa Sensei, the Japanese attunement. We also received the attunement from the U.S. Reiki master, and then I also had the mastery attunement. So within a very short period of time, I had 3 attunements on top of just, we were constantly in the evenings, you know, after we concluded kind of all the set plans and stuff, we would hang out in that the workshop room area, and we would just exchange the energy, or we would work on each other for anyone that was tired or sore or feeling anything. And so there was just a lot of energy, and then being in a shared space with, you know, people that are all attuned and trained really creates a different energy. And so it wasn't easy to notice in the moment while we were in Japan any differences or anything, but as soon as I got home, it just felt different. I'm like, I'm here and I'm home, but this is not the same. Like when I left, I was like, cool, I'm gonna unplug. When I get back, I'll plug back in and just continue to work and do everything I was doing beforehand and carry on. And it was just a completely different feeling of like, nope, that's not what's gonna happen. Yes, we're gonna plug back in and do all the things that are like mandatory, but we're also gonna reevaluate and continue to trim the fat per se. When I left, I was removing as much excess from my calendar as I could. It didn't have to do directly with my business, or if, when I looked at it, you know, a very emphatic yes. And it was just like a yes, I can do this, but do I want to? You know, taking things off. So coming home, that was enhanced of, you know, it's not aligned. I'm going to be stepping away in full from these responsibilities. And so being able to detach from those things, recognizing, you know, we were in Japan for 2 weeks total. And so during that time, you know, when I travel, I notice how little I actually need. This time I packed significantly lighter than I normally do. And so realizing that of, you know, how much we have attachment to things, items, but in reality, once you kind of pick up and go somewhere else, you realize you don't need a whole lot. You can just clothes on your back and whatever's in your pockets is really all that's required. And so I've been shedding a lot. I've been, you know, cleaning out and trying to declutter space of just like, okay, here's things that I need and that I'll use, and here's things that I've had for a very long time, but that I don't need. So letting go of those, both physically, energetically, with my time. And that shift has changed kind of the way that I'm looking at business in a variety of ways. Also, the knowingness of trusting in the universe, like consciously, it's one thing to say it, to believe it, but to feel it is a little different. And for so many serendipitous things to have during the trip, it really solidified and anchored in things that I knew consciously and that I believed, where I could actually feel it. I could feel guidance, I could feel connection to be like, everything's going to work out and it'll be fine, even though this isn't what we planned. And so what I feel and the feedback I've got from others is like there's a different level of confidence or certainty that I have now, that I attribute to kind of, you know, the completion of the mastery training, as well as just this other level of knowing, where it's like, yeah, I'll set an intention and come up with a loose plan, but also be flexible in whatever that looks like. And so the business has been the same. There was kind of a struggle I had where, you know, with now being a Reiki master, not practitioner, I get to redo a lot of my marketing materials, my business cards, and all these things. And kind of my moniker before was self-development sensei and Reiki practitioner. So kind of the two titles. And now looking at it, trying to merge it, the title I have is just Reiki Master Sensei. And so looking at it from, you know, the outside in, there was levels of resistance I had to changing it or merging the two. And I realized it was more of like a fear of judgment. Like, oh, the concern would be, oh, he's no longer doing the self-development piece of business. It's another change where, you know, my patterns in the past is to start something and then move into something else. Where in the past, I've probably had 7 or 8 other businesses that just kind of fell off. Where this is, you know, about the 8th one that I've had, but I've stuck with it. The difference this time is that it's evolved. It hasn't been something I put down. It's not that I'm putting down self-development. It's just now being merged and integrated, where what I was doing anyway was people I work with in self-development will also have Reiki sessions. They'll do meditations. So it's infused and incorporated that way. The people that I work with and do strictly just Reiki sessions on, at the end, when we do the debrief, we get to talking about how whatever the pain point or the discomfort or the chakra blockages, whatever's coming up for that individual, stems from their mindset. And so it's a self-development conversation anyway. So now more fully integrating both into one as a Reiki Master Sensei to still be doing that work to help people heal in the full spectrum, like not just looking at one area of their life, but in totality, right? Like, what is your mindset? What are the physical issues you have that are bothering you right now? What are the habits that you're carrying? And then what's the work and the root cause that we need to address in order to actually support you in the full yourself? Those are kind of the main business shifts or things changed since coming back.
I don't know who the person was that was being interviewed because I came in midway and I left before the whole thing was done. But I was in this space where I heard 2 people talking, and the one person shared how confidence comes from us giving ourselves permission to do whatever. And I have been sitting with that for several days, Jeff, because when I became a Reiki master, I felt this whole incredible expansion for myself, but I was also stepping into a whole new level of what I believed was possible for me. And in that, I now see, looking back, that the ceremonies, the time together, the integration, the conversations, all of those were I was giving myself permission through those different things in order to be able to move into this new space. And so I've been sitting with that for a while, this concept of what am I giving myself permission to do or not do? And what do I give myself permission to believe is possible or not possible? And I'm enjoying this process of sitting with this. There are some things I don't enjoy so much sitting with, but this one really caught my attention and has me thinking. And so as you talked about that space of becoming a Reiki master, and you are right, doing 3 attunements in that space and being able to be inside of the energy because other people are as well, right? So we have these auras or these biofields, and they overlap. When you hug somebody, you're sharing energy with them as well. That's for our audience that may not know about what Reiki is. And so in that space then, and the other thing I like to say for people who haven't experienced Reiki is, if you are in a crowded place like an airport and somebody walks behind you, you can feel their energy if it's different enough from your own. You don't have to turn around to know, and they don't need to say anything either. They don't need to bump into you for you to know that there is somebody who's either walked through your aura or biofield, or somebody who has is standing inside of that space. And so sometimes people will tease and say, moms have eyes in the back of their head. No, I think it's sensing the energy and feeling that energy and just knowing that something else is going on behind us. And so as you talked about going through 3 attunements, what a beautiful, amazing thing to be in that space where everybody was at some level acknowledging that there is healing in this energy, this particular vibration of energy we call Reiki.
Yeah. I like the the eyes on the back of the head is so true, right? Moms can just sense, hey, the kids are up to something. You can feel it in their energy.
Yes. Yes. So as you are looking at things really specifically, and this is a very selfish question that I'm asking, very personal for me, as you are taking these things off and saying, just because I can do them doesn't mean that I'm supposed to do them right now. That's my way of saying what you beautifully said earlier. What are you doing with what other people might consider your extra time?
Yeah, so I guess my habit or my way of operating beforehand was to do a million things at once. But one thing that I've realized is that there's a high volume or a large quantity, but the quality has suffered to some degree. I think because I'm constantly just doing and working, I try my best not to have quality be affected, but also in hindsight realizing that it always is. And so there's not so much free time, it's just more focused into less buckets. So I still have a variety of things I'm involved in and participating in, but what I've been able to do now is allocate more time, energy, and direction in those areas. Beautiful. So there's a lot of fairs that I've been participating in where I'll have a booth and be offering Reiki sessions. And so, in the past, it was like, okay, well, there's one this weekend, but I have this other thing I need to do or that I'm going to be doing, so I can't do that weekend. Kind of clearing off my schedule has allowed me to actually book more of those throughout the year. So Reiki goes up, as well as building a team. So I network a lot, and we connect with a lot of other Reiki practitioners where the ones that are kind of in alignment and that feel we're able to collaborate with, and then we do so and we share the booth. And so being able to expand that, my vision and intention is to have any event I go to, I want to have 4 tables running simultaneously where, we can have 4 people at once. And this past weekend, that just completed, we had 3 tables running, and there was a moment when we had 3 people all being worked on, and then one was queued up. We're doing aura healing from our friend that does aura healings and kind of does intake and builds a wait list for us. I just had a moment where I was like, again, the intention was set, the vision is there, and we're now one step closer. The next step being to have a 4th table up and running at an event. So I'm really excited to see how that continues to unfold and grow. And that's just one example of, the time that I additionally has allowed me to grow that team, expand things, and continue to do these events where each time we do one, we learn something that can improve the process, can improve our materials, can improve the experience for the people we work on.
So powerful. Would you say, Jeff, I know that the vast majority of the clients that I have, whether they are Reiki clients or Reiki students or people that I teach from stressed to best, that stress management course, the majority of them, vast majority, come from referrals. So would you say that as you are setting up the fairs and going to the fairs, that the vast majority of yours then come from that one-on-one space of meeting people in the fairs? Or would you say that you have a lot of people who are also referring others to you?
It's been interesting where I think people have shared that they have referred someone, but the amount of follow-up after that has not been a large amount. And I think a lot of the time it's to the referral ends up going to someone that is unfamiliar with the energy or what Reiki is.
Right. Yes.
And so I think there's still a barrier, or there's hesitation still in
Mm.
the circles I'm in, and the people that are being referred to me. There's still, kind of that question mark of, what is this? Will it help? Is it safe? All those things. And
Right.
so majority of the time, I have a touch point with an individual, and if they have curiosity at one of our booths, they'll pause and they'll ask the questions, and then they'll be like, okay, yeah, let me give it a shot. And then from that point, they'll become a return customer. When they see us at a fair again, they're like, oh, I want another session.
Right.
So they'll have their own experience and they'll share that with a friend. But the referrals, I think, are still something that's ramping up in terms of that. I think one aspect is like the amount of education. So I think I have a flyer or a brochure that kind of explains down what Reiki is and what you can kind of expect during a session. And so I think that's helpful. But
Yes.
yeah, it's been the experience so far.
And I really appreciate you talking about the education part. For those of us who are in this world of Reiki, when we find other people who are also trained, it's very easy to go into the language and the just the tempo of the conversation. But for people who aren't, I remember when I wasn't trained and asking those very beginning questions and knowing that I was going to go sit with somebody for 15 minutes in a chair, and that made sense to me. But I had no idea what she was going to be doing during that time as I'm setting up this appointment. But our mutual friend had the experience with it and said it was really, really helpful. And so I really appreciated my friend's testimony in front of the person who was offering this. And that was part of my story. I went and sat for 15 minutes, went home that night. And Jeff, I slept the best that I had in over 4 years and got up early the next morning. I was in Southern California and drove up the coast to go visit some other family and stopped in Santa Barbara and had this massive experience of being so peaceful, watching the ocean in Santa Barbara and just watching the movement of it. And it just was a different experience for me. I'd seen the ocean so many different times, Pacific, Atlantic, Indian. I'd seen them, right? But that space of being able to just be present with was something that I said, I've got to learn how to do this because I want to be able to have that experience again. I do caution people on chasing the experience because Reiki is accumulative and every experience is going to be different. And so what we are ready at that point to be able to heal or release or let go or whatever the word happens to be, that's what's going to happen at that particular time. And so to not be chasing necessarily an experience to say, I had that and I want to have that again. Now I understand that. That isn't necessarily how it works. What's been your experience?
Yeah. Every session is unique. So sessions between individuals will be completely different, but even within the same individual, it'll be different based on what they have going on at the moment. So you can see someone, one day and the next day they could have a completely different experience because the energy is going to go and affect whatever they need the most. So, it trickles down in a priority system that they may not consciously be aware of. And so each time, it could be, I had an emotional release. I've had people cry after working on them. I've had people fall asleep. I've had people recharge. I've had people, purge. And so it's a variety of things, and it all depends on that individual. And so my personal experience was, the first time I ever interacted with the energy itself, I didn't know anything about it. I had experience, and then it actually led to an unfolding of a Kundalini awakening that I had no idea was happening. And so it was the course of a year that things kind of transpired and unlocked for me. But the kind of the origin or the starting point of that was a Reiki session. And so that's one thing I kind of tend to let people know. It's like, hey, there could be effects that, you'll be aware of and some that you may not. So if you start to have weird experiences or questions, like, here's my information, feel free to reach out. Because it could be, something that you go home that night and have an experience with, or it could be something that happens over the course of the year.
Yes. There's a book, I'll think of the name of it. But she talks about Reiki, how people, their first night of sleep, after for their very, very first experience with Reiki can sometimes have really bizarre dreams. Not bizarre from the standpoint that their pineal gland is finally relaxed and it's releasing extra chemicals. And so from that point, then that they can have super weird dreams. And my experience has been about 1 in 100. But that's been something that I've been really careful to share with people who are coming in for a first experience. And I know that I have done both hands-on and also distance Reiki. Is distance, I know that you do hands-on, but is distance Reiki something also that you are working with, that you are sharing with other people?
Yeah. I offer it for a variety of different ways. So I have meditation groups that meet, one on Monday night, one on Friday afternoon. And in those spaces, typically I'll infuse it with distance Reiki because they're virtual calls. I have people that'll book virtual sessions with me. And a lot of my self-development clients are not local. So when I share the energy with them, it's also a distance as well. And yeah, same thing, right? The effects can be in that moment. It could be delayed. It could be over the course of a period of time. And so in person or distance, I find that there's not a difference in the outcome or the, it's more of a difference in the moment experience. So
Right.
when I work on people in person, they can feel the heat transferring from my hand. At
Yes.
distance, they may warm up, but they won't feel or correlate to like, oh, your hand is placed in a specific area, but they may be like, this area got warm. It's like, that's where I was focusing the
Yes.
energy at the time.
The other thing that I've noticed about the difference between in-person and distance is when people come to me in person, I have curated the space, right? So I know what day the trash truck comes. I know the noises in the neighborhood, those kinds of things. And so I'm able to choose to book around those things if I wish. And, you know, the table is set up. It has the 100% cotton sheets on it. It has a bolster. It has extra padding so that they're going to relax down into that. All of those things are set up. The music is curated. The ambiance is just completely created. And one of the things that I've noticed with distance Reiki is that space of training people to be aware of these things. These are things that they can be doing for their own self-care or their own self-relaxation, but to do a bit more of that training part of, you know, if you want to have music on, feel free to do that. But if I do music either over Zoom or over the call, it's going to sound poppy and it's not going to be what you're wanting on your side. And, you know, if you want to have a scent, you know, feel free to have a diffuser. Some of those kinds of conversations. And those are things that when somebody comes in person, I don't need to have. So it's a little bit more responsibility, perhaps, I would say, for my clients when I'm doing distance Reiki with them.
Yeah, that's cool. Because like you said, right, like when they come into you, you've already curated it, everything's set up. So they don't think about it. It's a little bit easier on their part. But distance
Right.
Reiki, like you said, it calls of them to be responsible for how they've set up their space and their own experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think my approach is slightly different in that I tend to do a lot of guerrilla Reiki, sense of like I'll do it anywhere and everywhere.
Right.
I've done it in bars. I've done it in a tree. I've done it in the backseat of a car. So it's those aren't the best experience for the individual in the sense of they're not fully relaxed. There may be a lot of distractions around, but the effect is unaffected because the energy is still going to transfer. Yet just their own experience of like, this is much different from laying down, being fully comfortable and immersed. Receiving of the energy, but yeah, so it is something that, you know, we get to be mindful of and let them know they can prepare, but the level they take it to is really up to them.
So true. And just one more thing, the difference that I see between in-person and distance. In person, they have to get up and drive themselves home. And I had one who would always come in the evening, and she would call herself Reiki drunk. And so I would get her to sit in the chair, and we would sit there and we would talk for a while before she got in her car to drive just the 3 blocks to go home, right? But the beautiful thing about distance Reiki is the person who's doing Reiki on you can just let you know that they're hanging up. and that you can stay in that space and go to sleep and not have to get up and go someplace else. So there are definitely advantages in both of those spaces, and the healing is legit in both of those places as well. Jeff, what advice would you give to somebody who is considering trying Reiki? They've heard maybe a little bit about it. They're listening to this conversation. It's piqued their interest. They understand it's a little bit about healing, and they would love to know a bit more. But what advice would you give to somebody who is coming to your fair and asking you questions? What kind of advice would you give?
So similar to the other spaces I'm in, right? The individuals we choose to work with or surround ourselves with are important. And so if you're able to and familiar with your own intuition, trusting and following that, to pick the right person to teach and guide you, because there are, dozens upon dozens of variations of Reiki and variations of people that teach it.
Yes.
So finding the right energetic fit, the right modality, the right, all the things is important. And so trusting your intuition to find that person for yourself is number one.
Yes.
If you aren't able to discern that, then to find what feels right, to begin to hone that sense of this an emphatic yes, undeniable, you're like, I want to do this with this person, or is it still that level of hesitation? And if there's that level of hesitation, that to just ask questions. I had a question come in yesterday where someone just shared, we did a session yesterday, and she was sharing with a friend. She's like, oh, they've done training in level 1, but she was feeling doubtful. She's like, I don't know if I trust myself to be able to become a Reiki practitioner or to do to perform this on other people. And she's like, she asked me to ask you what advice you have for that. And my response to that was just, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right.
Right.
Trusting yourself to know that, are you willing to? No matter of can you, it's, are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to put in the hours? Are you willing to make mistakes and learn from them? Because the energy itself, anyone and everyone is capable of. It's not a question of can I, it's a question of will I.
Yes. I so appreciate that. Are there other thoughts, things that you want to reiterate as we are finishing up this time together?
I think the takeaway I've had, or the biggest shift that I've noticed, is to really, really understand how powerful it is to enjoy what you do.
Yes.
And to not force things. And I think in our society, there's so much pressure of what we should be doing, of what we think is necessary, of external influence. And then really just connecting to what's authentic for you. What do you feel called to? What do you want to be doing? That's a question that we ask ourselves enough. What do I want in this moment? And, if the job you're in is unfulfilling and you're unhappy doing it, that's going to create the experience of your life, because you spend the majority of your time doing that. And so really finding your purpose, your calling, and then coming up with ways to have that become your lifestyle or your meaning. I think that's one of the first steps towards, finding that happiness, letting go of that resistance of forcing yourself to do something out of necessity, right? Like, I have to do this because I have to pay my bills. Okay, well, how do you find a way to make that enjoyable for yourself? How do you have that become something you experience in a positive light, rather than something you do out of obligation and then start to feel resentment for?
If somebody's finding themselves that they are unhappy, they are at a job that is paying their bills, it's providing a livelihood for them, but it is not fulfilling for them, how do you encourage or suggest people start that process of figuring out what it is that would make them happy? I have found for myself at times that I'm so focused on the unhappy or the what's irritating that I have forgotten how to focus on anything else. And so what advice would you give to somebody who's in that place of feeling unhappy and knowing that perhaps a change would be really helpful for them?
One of my favorite quotes or things to say is where the mind goes, energy flows. So if you're focused on the issue, problem, what's going wrong, you'll create more of that. Versus if you focus on gratitude, what's going well, what you're celebrating, what you've accomplished, then you'll create more of that. The other, the next step to that would be to really do a deep dive for more about you. It's interesting how, nobody knows you better than you know yourself. And at the same time, a lot of us don't know who we are because we've never stopped to ask that question. We've never stopped to contemplate or look introspectively. And so taking the time to learn about you is important. And the irony of that is sometimes that's a journey you can't take alone. So finding, again, the right chemistry and the right support system, whether that looks like a mentor, a life coach, a therapist, a psychiatrist, whoever that person is for you, that can be the sounding board or the reflection or the mirror so that you can learn more about you. And these things are available all around us, right? So anytime you're frustrated with someone else, it's a mirror and a reflection of the things that bother you about you. If it didn't exist, it wouldn't bother you in the way that it does. You would just be, you'd have compassion, hold space for that individual. Like, oh, you're this way. That's your experience, and it doesn't bother me, but I'm going to remove myself from it. Versus, oh, this bothers me. Why? Because it's a remembrance or a reminder of something you have or hold that you may not be the happiest with. And so that's not something people can be aware of, or sometimes it takes somebody else to point it out to you. And that's where it's very important to have that support and that guidance to allow someone to support you in learning about you. And so it's this irony of like, sometimes the best way to learn about you is to talk to someone else versus spend time alone. And then for other people, that is the case where it is not looking external, but really to just do that work alone. So it all depends on the individual where they're at.
And I think in the beginning, having somebody help and give tools can be so powerful. And maybe there'll be times later on where the person will choose to work by themselves using the tools that they have learned. And those tools can come, as you said, in so many different ways. But I don't know what I don't know still in my life, right? And so to have somebody else be able to point that out for me, and then I get to evaluate, is this the time that I want to do a deep dive on that or not? Is this the time that really makes sense to me to believe it or not? And we have these places to give ourselves permission. And one of those places is to give ourselves permission to heal and permission to grow and permission to change. And change is inevitable. And do I want to change because things around me are changing and therefore I must adapt to that? Well, there's going to be some degree of that. But my belief is that it's stronger for me at this point in my life, for me to look at things and say, this is how I want to change, and then to watch what happens after that. Jeff, it has been such a privilege to have you come back and share this experience about Reiki origins. It has me thinking about so many different things, and I just appreciate you expanding my mind and that you taking the time to share with our audience around the world about this. And I heard you say that there's going to be a trip again next year. Is this true?
Yeah, the intent is for us to do this year. This was our trial run of it to kind of see what works, what doesn't work, and continue to improve it. And I think every trip will be like that, where we're going to learn things and improve it every year. But the intention was to have it be a closed, small group of 5 students on both sides, and then next year open it up and expand it to even more people. But what we learned on this trip was, I think that's the perfect number.
It is.
Having it be a more small, close group allows for a lot more time and connection. And also, one of the aspects of accommodations. So, your plan would be maybe getting a hotel and having room blocks or something like that. But again, the Airbnb was perfect. So being able to stay in the same space, to be able to share, once we're done and complete, I think that was very important for the trip and the journey itself. So we will be keeping it kind of an exclusive small group of about 5 people for both countries to bring. So we will be having another next year. It will be a small group. So if you're interested, reach out to me now.
Yes.
We're going to fill up those slots early in the year once we kind of pick our dates and figure out the logistics. My team is actually, we're having a meeting this weekend to kind of do a debrief and reevaluate, everything from the trip. So that'll be the beginning of our planning for next year.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you so much, friend. And we look forward to more conversations about all the things that you do, because you are impacting lives, Jeff, in a really unique and powerful way. And I'm just so grateful for you.
Thank you so much again for having me, Sarah. It's been a pleasure to share all of this with you. And it's been insightful for me as well. Some of these were thoughts and these were things I haven't said out loud. So it's great to put it out there. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And to our audience, we are just so grateful for you being here. And if you are curious about Reiki, I invite you to begin to reach out to Jeff, reach out to me, reach out to somebody that who's in your area who might be doing Reiki, and just begin these conversations about what it could look like. And then for those who are doing business that's with Reiki, whether you are infusing your work with Reiki or you are actually teaching or doing as a practitioner, carry on, take care of yourself, make sure that you are listening internally as well, and that you are taking time for yourself to be able to breathe. It is no small matter to be caring for other people and allowing this beautiful healing energy to roll through you, but also to be taking care of yourself. And until next time, take care.